Hey, welcome back to the Drum Rundown. We are here at the Mother Church, the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, Tennessee, and I am here with an absolute legend and someone that I've been very excited to get on the Drum Rundown, Jean-Paul Gaster of Clutch. What is going on, man?
Hey, very happy to be here.
Nice to meet you. It's a pleasure.
Of course.
I'd be remiss to say hello from my band because you have been such an incredible influence on our lane of music, being rock and roll and stoner and psych and all things. So thank you very much for your contributions over the years to kind of carving out a very kind of unique lane. You've been through a lot of different eras of rock and roll and grunge and early hardcore on the East Coast and through stoner rock and stuff like Kyuss and Fugazi. And it's just an incredible legacy that you guys have had to kind of make it through all of that, but stay so true to yourself and to your own sound. How do you think playing in Clutch over all of those decades as the music industry has changed around you, how have you kind of stayed true to what you do on drums?
Well, you know, I feel like it's those first records that you listen to, it's those first shows that you see, those first drummers that you hang out, you know, those first impressions really make up who you are as a drummer. And I think those things continue to influence you, and you continue to think about those things really for the rest of your life. So for me, there was a few sort of key players that I listened to early on. Probably the most important of them was probably Bill Ward from Black Sabbath. Yep. I was taken with his playing because there was, although Black Sabbath was a super heavy band, there's a lot of dynamic and there was a lot of tradition that I heard in his playing that made me want to dig. And so from guys like Bill Ward, I started to dig back and started to listen to guys like Ginger Baker and Art Blakey and Elvin Jones and Max Roach. And so it really kind of opened a door for me. And so to this day, Bill Ward still has he's an important drummer for me. And then other drummers too. For instance, Juju House from Experience Unlimited. Also played for Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers. This is a drummer from Washington, D.C., who I had the opportunity to see early on as well. Again, you know, these players influence who you are, and you sort of reference those players as you make records and play shows. So, you know, in that way, I think it's very much the same kind of thing. I dig the drums, I dig those players. I love learning more about the instrument and the music. And you know, being able to sort of carve out a career and follow those things that you're so passionate about, it's a special experience.
Yeah, and you've been at Ground Zero a couple times at some like big shifts in what rock and roll sounds like. I mean, you were at Ground Zero in the go-go movement, and then obviously like the stoner movement with Kyuss, all the things that Fugazi was doing. Like, what was it like kind of being through different eras of watching kind of things change around you?
Well, I can tell you one thing specifically about Fugazi was that being able to see those guys early on and watch the amount of energy that they put into their shows. And there was always a feeling of sort of almost like improvisation. And I'm not sure how much improvising was actually going on there. But from a fan standpoint, watching that band play, you always got the feeling that you didn't know what was quite going to happen. So, you know, seeing that kind of a band was important. Seeing the Bad Brains at the 930 Club in Washington, D.C. Yep. Mind-blowing experience. You know, these things you carry with you throughout your whole experience.
Yeah, and I think coming full circle, it's like something with myself and the guys in my band just being such huge Clutch fans have got to do and watch you kind of pave the road for us. So we appreciate it, and
thank you.
We're happy to be part of this story and see you play at this historic venue, man. It's just awesome that we get to watch bands like Clutch at the Ryman. I don't know. Props to the Ryman for letting us see awesome bands like this in this cool room.
No doubt about it.
Your setup hasn't changed a lot over the years. You got just like the kind of the thing that works.
Yes.
And it's always kind of this Gretsch. It's a different sparkle than I thought I would see today. Let's talk about the finish first.
Yeah, well, these are blue sparkles. you know, I have a soft spot for sparkle drum kits
Yep.
in general. I think the first kit that I was really proud of that I bought was actually a Slingerland kit, and that was a green sparkle kit. I like the sparkles because they look great under the lights.
Yeah, that looks beautiful. Gretsch USA Custom.
Yep.
Run us around the sizes of the toms.
We've got 1424 bass drum, 1014 tom tom, 1416 floor tom, and 1618 floor tom. And then the snare drum is a 4160. That's the classic 5x14 chrome over brass drum that they do. Definitely a workhorse of a drum.
It's a workhorse of a drum, and what's interesting with your sound and how beefy everything is that it's a shallower drum. What led you to the 5 and not like a 6.5 or even, you know, an 8 or something for the beef?
Sure. I've experimented with deeper drums as well. Overall, in general, I tend to be 5x14, 5.5x14. Most all the recordings that we've made over the years have been with sort of more shallow snare drums. I like the increased sensitivity that you get out of a more shallow drum. And sometimes I think deeper drums, for me anyway, they tend to sound boxy. But you know, the thing is, every drummer really has their own sound, and so the sound that I bring to this drum is going to be totally different than one that you would bring. So, you know, in that way, you know, you develop a relationship with these drums, and you kind of know what it is you're looking for.
Yeah, a lot of, like in the rig rundowns, they always talk about the, you know, guitar sounding so different in a player's hands, something in the fingers and the hands of the player, like, you know, if you sit behind somebody else's drum set, you cannot make it sound like they make it sound. It's just, there is that relationship.
Yeah.
In terms of tuning, what are you kind of going for when you're tuning up these USA Customs?
Well, I'm trying to get a lot of tone out of the drums. I want a sustained note, as sustained as I can possibly get. I don't use any muffling on any of these drums. The same goes for the bass drum, wide open. And the idea is just to get the most sound out of the drum. And this way, I think there's more dynamic range when you don't have dampening or muffling on the drums. I think you can get more sounds out of the drums that way.
Yeah, I think you're going for the natural resonance of the shell, but you have to be really good at tuning drums to get it to do it. And you're using some really good heads to get it done. These Evans UV2s, these codeds. Talk to me about how you got to these heads.
Well, for years it was G2 codeds on the tom-toms. And Evans introduced the UV2s, and we put them on, and I find them to be very easy to tune. But I think the thing that really stands out for me is how durable they are. They last a lot of shows. They stay in tune. And I think they work really well too in conjunction with the resonant tom-tom heads that I have on there, the Genera resonant.
Okay, and you're using Genera resonance on the bottom.
Yes.
And I know you do something interesting with tuning. I've heard you mention before that you try to go a half step up when you're tuning. Is that still something that you're doing?
I do. I try to tune the resonant head just a little bit higher than the Vater head, and in that way, I think I get a sort of a more true sound, and there's not too much of that sort of unwanted low frequency stuff that sometimes makes big drums like these can sound muddy if you're not mindful of that.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job tuning them and everything, keeping away from overtones. There's no moon gels, there's no wallet on your snare, there's no crazy stuff happening. You're just getting the natural snare, sound and the natural tom sounds, and it sounds awesome. Talk to me about this Evans 56 kick head.
Yes. I've tried most of the different heads that Evans has for kick drum heads, and I've found this one to be the most reliable across the board. I feel like the bass drum is the most susceptible to sort of being affected by the room. So sometimes you put a bass drum up and it'll sound great in one room, and then you go take that very same drum and you put it on a different stage, and things can start to sound not the way you would like them to. These Evans 56 heads, I feel as though they're super consistent. Regardless of the room, the bass drum's always going to sound the way that I would like it to sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And consistency is key, obviously, when you're jumping room to room, venue to venue, night to night. And these are certainly getting it done, as well as consistency in your cymbal family, Meinls. I mean, the Byzance series, you've been with them for a long time.
For many years, over 20 years now. I'm a fan of Meinl cymbals in general. I find them to be a company that does a lot of innovations across the board for all different styles of cymbals. For me personally, I love these Byzance cymbals. They give me that sort of that Turkish thing, that we're all looking for. But they are very consistent and they're quite durable. A lot of times those Turkish style cymbals tend to be maybe not the greatest for heavy rock players, but these have been great. They're durable, they sound great from night to night, and you don't have to hit them so hard either. There's a lot of sound available to you, and you don't have to beat the crap out of the cymbal.
Yeah, there's a lot of dynamics in these cymbals and a lot of expression, for sure. Can you run me around the horn with what you got on the setup tonight?
Sure, yeah. All these are traditional series, so they're all lathed on both the top and the bottoms. Okay. So over here we got 15-inch medium hi-hats. I usually play 15s, and I've had some other. I've got a pair of the extra dry cymbals that I like quite a bit. I think for live, though, I prefer these, the traditional series. They have a little bit more presence. I think they cut a little more. So we've got 15s over here. We got a 20-inch medium crash over here. I'll skip over here. We got a 21-inch medium crash. And this is a 20-inch extra thin, and this one's hammered. So it's pretty dry. Of all the cymbals I have, this is probably the driest and sort of the trashiest cymbal out of all of them. This cymbal here this is an interesting cymbal. This is a 26-inch, one of a kind Meinl that they made. It's sort of a prototype. They made me a few different 26-inch ride cymbals, and so I have one that stays in England. And this is the one that I play here in the States. I love this cymbal because, again, you don't have to hit it so hard. There's a lot of sound available to you. When people hear that's a 26-inch ride cymbal, they have this idea that it's going to be this sort of...
It's a monster. It's a mothership, dude. Look at this thing.
It's huge.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it is you don't have to lay into it to get a lot of sound out of it. And that's what's so great about all these cymbals. All of them tend to be maybe a little bit on the bigger side. But again, the same thing. If you don't have to hit them quite so hard, and you have more tonal possibilities available to you when you have a bigger cymbal, which is important, because I'm playing on a stage here with some pretty loud amplifiers, and so you want to have a lot of color and dynamic available to you, and so these cymbals definitely help me with that.
Yes, I mean, I was going to say, of all of the bands, you have quite the job to get done to cut through the mix and kind of be present. When you're picking your cymbals and your sizes, what are the characteristics that you're going for in the family? Are you trying to get them to play off of each other in a certain way, or does each individual cymbal need to do something?
I try not to sort of force them into a family. I tend to just audition some cymbals before I go on tour. I'm lucky enough to have a good collection of them at home, and so I just go through and I start picking out the ones that I feel might work on this particular tour. There are some things that I look for sort of across the board, and that goes for crashes and ride cymbals, and that is that I want a cymbal that is light enough that'll open it up and I'll be able to crash on it. So even on this big 26, I can still crash on that. Yeah. So I'm looking for that. I'm also looking for some definition in the bell, because I'll use all these bells at some point during the night. And then, of course, you want your classic sort of crash sound. Yeah. But overall, again, I'm looking for a lot of sounds out of just a few cymbals, because there's not really that many cymbals up here.
It's a pretty pared down, setup, considering some of the other bands in the genres in the bands that you open for and bands that open for you throughout the years. It's just like it can be so dichotomous. You're getting it done with a little.
Well, yeah,
compared.
Any more would confuse me.
Yeah, fair enough. But one thing that's not confusing, because it's always there and it's always right where it should be, is the cowbell.
Yes.
The favorite. Talk to me about this cowbell.
Well, the cowbell's been a part of the sound really since the beginning of the band. This also goes back to DC Go-Go.
Yeah, right.
Growing up, those cowbell rhythms were sort of everywhere. So the cowbell is a very important part of the band. In this case, I'm playing a Meinl cowbell. I've got a bunch of different ones of theirs. This one is their steel bell. I have a copper one as well. And I just try to put a little bit of tape on that just to cut a little bit of the top ring off of it. But yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's awesome. And you're getting all of these sounds out of some pretty cool sticks. Talk to me about these Vaters.
Yeah, well, I'm playing some bigger sticks than usual. These are Vater XD Rocks. And they're sort of the biggest stick that Vater has available for drum set at the moment. I started taking lessons with Dom Famularo over the pandemic. And Dom suggested you use these really big practice sticks. And he's got his own signature sticks that he uses. And they're quite wide. And I just got used to that feeling of practicing with those sticks. And so I started, when we got back on the road again after the pandemic, I wanted a heavier stick. So I auditioned a bunch of different ones, and I ended up with these. What I like about this stick is that although it is a heavy stick, and it's pretty long too, the tip on it is, that's a barrel tip, so it still has quite a bit of definition on the cymbals. So I like that. I prefer this kind of tip over an acorn tip, say, or one of the other ones.
And it's got a pretty short shoulder. Like there's not a whole lot there before the tip.
Yeah.
It's just, that's all beef.
It's pretty beefy. Yeah.
How do you think that's changed has that changed any of the ways you approach dynamically throwing such a bigger stick around?
Well, in my studies with Dom, we worked a lot out of stick control. We worked out of accents and rebounds and master studies. And I've been able to get better at playing at quieter volumes, regardless of the size of stick that I've been using. So even when I try to play more quietly during the set, these sticks they're quite big, and I've been able to get to the sounds that I want with a stick of this size. I think part of it also of me switching to a bigger stick was just part of the challenge too.
Okay.
I'm always challenging myself and trying to sort of push the limits of what I might be able to do with the drums. I remember hearing an interview with Tony Williams where he was talking about switching to 2Bs at some point during the 70s. And that was when he was playing the big Gretsch kit, 13 and 14-inch tom-toms. And so I was just listening to him and him being able to play so dynamically with 2Bs, and I thought that was cool. So just challenging myself a little bit.
I think that's a cool ethos to have, that like you could kind of be like, hey, I'm in this thing, it's working, set it and forget it. Let's not rock the boat too much, but then challenging yourself to like keep studying, keep learning, changing things up. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'll probably switch to another stick eventually and different size drums eventually, but this is the thing that works for me right now. And I think that's important too, to sort of just always reevaluate yourself and your sound and what it is you're trying to achieve. Because, if you get too stuck in your ways, at least for me anyway, I begin to lose interest. I prefer to keep things as fresh as possible.
And I know that Clutch is always trying to go into the studio making sure that they don't make the album that they've made before and that you're doing something new. When you go into the studio, how are you approaching your setup? Are you looking for new tones that match what you guys are kind of writing and what you're exploring? I know you record everything and keep track of everything you're writing. So
yeah, we do. We record everything that we do. All the demos and stuff that we have. We record those at the jam room that we got at the Doom Saloon. And that setup is either this kit or one very similar to it. I have another Gretsch USA kit at home. The sizes of the drums and the tunings stay pretty much the same for the recordings. On this last record, we did put a little bit of moon gel around
Okay.
it.
All right.
Yeah, a little bit. But you know, for the most part, it really is the same stuff. Cymbals also tend to be usually the same. And this, we'll definitely experiment with different snare drums in the studio. I do find myself always sort of going back to chrome over brass, though.
Yeah. Chrome over brass is, I mean, it just has such character.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to beat when you have one in your arsenal.
Yeah.
For sure. I feel like the only thing we missed are pedals, DW9000s. It's just like the best.
You know, they're super dependable. I usually take them out of the box and do not ever adjust them.
Yeah.
I try not to go down that wormhole. I find that to be sort of more confusing and complicated than I prefer. So yeah, DW9000s. I mean, you can't go wrong.
Yeah. And in terms of your in-ear monitor mix, how are you getting things into your ears?
Well, the majority of the sound is really just these overheads here. So I try to start with that, and then we'll put a little bit of kick drum in there, and then from there we'll just bring in the guitars or the bass or vocals as we need. These days I'm trying to keep the volume down in my ears. After 30 plus years of doing this thing, my hearing has definitely taken a beating. So I try to keep the volume down, and working with the in-ears is great because that definitely protects your ears as well.
Yeah, well, I will be protecting my ears tonight when I come and watch you shred at the Ryman. I'm so excited to catch you guys here in Nashville. It's been a pleasure sitting with you, Jean-Paul.
Of course.
Of Clutch. Incredible. Thank you so much.
Of course.
This has been the Drum Rundown. We will see you on the next one.